So there's a lot of information online that I'm sure you could find with a quick Google search. How to create intimacy in a relationship. And it's going to be like, here's 5 tips and tricks. Here's 4 things you could say. Here's 5 things you can do, whatever. And while probably a lot of that advice is actually really good, solid action taking advice, there's a real inherent problem with taking that advice that actually perpetuates the intimacy problem and makes matters worse. And that's what we're going to break down in this video. Most people, when they're wanting to, increase the intimacy in their relationship, they're often given this advice that is so externally focused. It's so much focused on what can I do? What can I say? What action steps can I take in order to build up the intimacy? And intimacy just, that can be sex, that could just be emotional intimacy. Intimacy essentially just means closeness. I think a lot of the advice out there is actually really, really good advice. It's just always missing this one really critical component, and that's the intention behind why you are doing something. Because when the intention behind why you are doing something is off, like it's off kilter, or there's a shadowy side to it, or a subconscious program of, lack of self-worth or manipulation or something like that, that vibration, that intention gets put into the relationship, and it actually makes the intimacy problems worse. So when looking at the hidden reason, the secret, the subconscious reason behind a loss of intimacy, we also have to first look at A, what actually is intimacy, and B, what is a relationship? Intimacy is closeness. Intimacy is like real intimacy is like 100% of you, 100% is meeting up against 100% of that other person. And it's only when you're showing up, like I almost imagine like 2 bubbles. It's only when you're showing up as 100% and you're able to meet that other 100% that a full intimate relationship can happen. And that's often what does not happen in relationships, because usually people, whether they realize it or not, are hiding. And so they're putting on a mask. They're keeping a lot of their truth kind of behind the surface of the bubble and only showing up with this. And then B, looking at, well, what is a relationship? I view relationships as like a separate entity, right? The relationship is kind of like the third party. The relationship is its own separate energy body that is different than just me. It's different than just my partner. It's the conglomeration, it's the co-creation of our 2 energies coming together. It's like a third party that exists in the middle. And that third party is a co-creation of the choices, the actions, the communications that you are voting for within that relationship. So both parties are looking at the relationship and they're kind of like building it. It's like you're building Legos, and they're building it with the building blocks of how each person is showing up in the relationship. And so when we're in a relationship, we're constantly voting for, we're constantly co-creating the energetics of that third party of the relationship. And in order to vote for really genuine, really authentic intimacy, I must be voting from 100% of me. And it's like this concept of 100% responsibility. I am taking 100% responsibility for my needs, for my emotional state, for my shadow, for what I am bringing into the relationship. But what happens with a loss of intimacy is that a person is lacking intimacy, closeness with themselves. And so when a person is lacking intimacy with themselves, they're fragmented, like their awareness is fragmented. It's split into different parts. So they have the part of themselves that wants one thing, and maybe that part of them is hidden, and they have the other part of themselves that wants something entirely different, and they're only bringing this part into a relationship. And when that situation happens, intimacy within the third party that is a relationship is absolutely impossible. There is nothing you can do. There is nothing you can say. There are no YouTube videos that you can watch of like 3 ways to create more intimacy. And none of it's going to work unless you're actually looking at the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is that your own consciousness is split into parts, and often these parts are at war. The part that you are not bringing into the relationship exists as a shadow, as like unknown information. It's still a part of you, but it's not explicitly being brought into the relationship. And so in order for there to be real, genuine intimacy, each party must have intimacy with themselves, full intimacy with themselves. Because it's from this place of like full intimacy and being congruent with your own actions, your own intentions, your own thought processes, your own shadows, subconscious shadows that lurk in the nooks and crannies of your subconscious mind. You must have intimacy with all of these different parts of yourself so that when you vote into the relationship, you're bringing with you your real self, your true self. But what most people do is that, we have shame about different parts of ourselves. We think that, one part of ourselves that's angry about this, I shouldn't be angry about that. And so I'm going to sidebar it. I'm going to push it off to the side. Or, I actually really don't like this sexual thing. So I'm going to push that off to the side because I want to please my partner. Or I'm not going to speak my truth in this situation because I don't feel worthy enough to speak my truth. I don't feel like my truth is valid. So let me push that off to the side. And these are just some examples, but people do this all the time in little and big ways where we have a split in our own consciousness, and one side is the shadow self, one side is the part where I'm like, I can't love or accept that part of me, so I'm going to basically pretend like it doesn't exist. I'm going to repress, deny, and ignore it. I'm going to shove it into the depths of my neurology, and I'm only going to present with this other part of myself. This is parts work, right? So there's 2 different parts. And because people do this all of the time, you can imagine that if there's 2 parties voting into the third entity that is the relationship, but they're both doing so from fragments of themselves, then the fragment of themselves, like the mask that they wear, is voted into the third party, into the entity that is the relationship. Meanwhile, they have these other parts of themselves that are not even in the relationship. And a lot of problems happen from this. The problems happen because it's almost like the 2 awarenesses that are within the relationship are not even on the same page. They're not even living in the same reality. But because their physical body is within the third party of the relationship, they end up blaming and pointing fingers at the other person for not creating situations and circumstances that make them feel the way that they want to feel. But they can never feel good. They can never feel fully intimate. They can never feel fully, seen and heard and validated and loved. Why else are we in relationships? They can never feel fully loved if they are not loving the most fucked up parts of themselves that they've shoved off into the corner. Now, as this is coming up, sidebar. This framework is not applicable to abusive relationships. If there's sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, any kind of abuse, none of this goes. That is the very clear sign that a massive boundary needs to be put in place, that you walk away from the abuse. If that is the case and you're having trouble walking away from the abuse, I recommend you download my free guide, which I'm actually going to talk about later in the video as well, called the Self-Sabotage Solution. And it's basically what the spiritual community is missing about the advice that they're giving and how to rewind that and repair it so that you're actually making real change in your life and you're not fighting yourself anymore. Okay. So back to the scheduled programming. This is for you if you are in a healthy relationship. The only way to achieve real true intimacy, to actually be really truly loved, is to open your arms, open your heart wide enough and start gathering these parts of you that you've swept under the rug, and then lovingly gather those parts of yourself and then bring them into the relationship. You're bringing all of you into the relationship. And when you do that, even though it's really hard, actually, this is not an easy process. But when you do that, you're signaling to the universe, you're signaling to your own neurology that you are showing up for full intimacy, that you're showing up to be fully loved and seen and heard and validated in the way that you actually want. And it really does kind of boil down to this concept of like taking 110% responsibility within the relationship. So yes, of course, there is a co-creation. There is a co-creative process within the relationship where you're like, hey, I'm coming forth with this subconscious, shadowy wound that I have where I feel unworthy of love. Are you willing to hold space for that? Is that something we can co-create and explore together? Can we leverage and use the relationship as a healthy mirror in order to push off against it and regather these parts of ourselves that we've shoved off to the side way the back in childhood, and continually expand, continually bring them into the relationship. And if you use this method, you can expand so much in relationships, because the relationship is not just about, what it used to be about 200 whatever years ago and beyond that, of like, can we just get together for safety? No, like we're at a place now where it's like, well, let's get together for something beyond just safety. Let's get together for using each other in this lovingly spiritual way where we're growing, where we can use each other as a mirror to see into where am I not being intimate with myself? Because the ultimate truth is like the more intimate you are with yourself, even the parts you hate about yourself, the more intimate your relationship is going to be. The way that this like translates into sexual intimacy with partnership is that, sex is such an intimate bodily thing that you do. It's very much rooted in the animal body. It comes from a lot of those animal body drives, and the animal body is the subconscious. And the parts of yourself that you've shoved off into a corner also exist in your subconscious, in the animal body. And so you can't expect your animal body to be on board with making love to somebody and doing the most physically intimate act that there ever is if you have, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, chosen to leave a bulk of you out. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to feel safe. There's probably going to be traces or large amounts of anger and disgust, which are really your animal body's way of communicating like, this is a boundary. I need you to actually be away because there's not a lot of safety here. So this is like this concept of taking full responsibility for the safety by bringing all of these aspects of you into the container of a safe, healthy relationship. Okay, so how do you take 110% self-responsibility in relationships? I do have 3 tips for you, and I recommend that you do these first. You take that responsibility and then take action. That's the big key difference here. The first one is to completely stop compromising on your truth. Your truth is your truth is your truth is your truth. You can't get rid of your truth. There's workability here. You can up-level your truth. You can gain intimacy with your truth. You can get to know the out of your truth and love your truth back into wholeness, because sometimes your truth is going to be a little bit messed up at first. And that's often why people ignore their truth and compromise on their truth. Because when we look at compromise, even as you say that word, as you hear me say that word, you notice what you feel in your body. Compromise is a contractive feeling. It is not in alignment with the natural order of the universe. It is not in alignment with expansion. Compromise is this kind of feeling. It's like rounded shoulders. It's caving in on yourself. It's, I'm going to put this part of me off to the side. And even though I don't like it, That's the important part. I don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyways. You can't not feel bad and vote for more bad feelings in the relationship when you compromise. This does not at all mean that a compromising solution is not going to be the outcome. That might be the outcome, but compromise in the light of intimacy, of self-intimacy and awareness is a quite different feeling. It's an expansive feeling. It's more along the vibrational feeling of co-creation. You're bringing this, crazy, ugly, maybe truth, and the other person's bringing their truth. And it's only when you have the full truth voted into the third party of the relationship that magic can happen and art can happen, because now you're existing in true co-creation. Compromise is not true co-creation. Compromise is, I'm going to swallow the feeling of feeling like shit in order to vote for this relationship. It's saying, I can't have myself and be in relationship at the same time. And so I have to compromise one or the other. I either have to compromise myself or I have to compromise the relationship. That's very linear black and white thinking. We humans have a prefrontal cortex. We can do better than that. And so it's within the step of completely stopping compromising on your truth that you got to get really brutally honest with yourself. And it's a bitter medicine. So that's why I say the brutal honesty, because if you have a truth, it is a part of you. You can't get rid of it. You cannot neurologically, with surgical tools, go in there into your nervous system, extract the little part of you that is that truth that was hardwired in way long ago in childhood or whenever, and cut that part out of you and leave it off to the side. Okay, that's not an option. You can't cut out any part of you. The only option you have is gaining intimacy to that part of you, because when you gain intimacy to that part of you, meaning you are getting closer to it, you are bringing your awareness to it. It's like you're taking your hands and you're reaching in to that pathway and you're rearranging it. You're making art with it. You're up-leveling it to like the highest co-creative possibility that it could possibly be. But the first step in this is to get brutally honest and to start journaling. What is my actual truth? Up or not, good, bad, right, wrong, ugly or otherwise, whatever. What is your actual truth? Even if it's unsavory, you are already operating from that truth subconsciously. Whether you want to or not, it's already a program that you are operating from. So you might as well bring your awareness to it. So what is your actual truth? Sometimes the truth that you land on is not so straightforward, and it's something that is not in alignment with what is healthy for the relationship. And if you get to that place, you have to peek under the hood. So go download my free guide, the self-sabotage solution, because I walk you through a bunch of really great ideas to really hone in, peek under the hood, and get to the root of it. Because ultimately, your body will never produce anything against you. It's not going to produce a truth. It's not going to produce a desire. It's not going to produce an emotion that is ever against you. But more often than not, unfortunately, you have to dig a little bit deeper to get to that truth. And that's what I have in the self-sabotage solution. Okay, the second component in taking full 110% responsibility within a healthy, intimate relationship is to do shadow work. So we kind of touched on this already, but shadow work is the experiences, the traumas, the parts of yourself that you've repressed, denied, ignored, shoved in your neurology that are existing as an operating program that you are operating from that you're not currently aware of. Shadow work is probably, I would say, the best way to gain intimacy with the unsavory parts of yourself, because it's ultimately just the parts of you that you kind of don't want to look at. But I can promise you that when you do look at those parts of yourself, awareness is light. And so when you bring the light of your awareness to your shadow self, that shadow transforms into light. And it actually gives you more free will, more agency, and more intimacy within yourself so that you can actually choose to bring more intimacy into the partnership. And the last tip for 110% self-responsibility in intimate relationships is to check your communication for intentions. And what I mean by that is so often we will speak words because we're trying to get a certain outcome. This would fall under the category of manipulation. I know people hate that word because we're like, well, I don't manipulate. Most people manipulate to some degree, to large degrees. So let's just put that on the table so that we can all kind of be aware of it. A lot of the manipulation, especially from, a healthy, really heart-centered individuals, it's not intentional manipulation. So I'm not calling anyone out like, oh, you're manipulative or you're trying to be manipulative. It's just that what I do is shadow work. And so we got to check ourselves if we're being manipulative. But the way that you do this, the way that you check your intention behind your communication is you check in with your body. Your body will never ever lie to you. Your mind lies all the time. And that's because our minds have a part of our brain that makes us very, very human, that separates us from animals in the wild. And that part of our brain is very creative. It can overlay information and situations and kind of like see things that aren't really there. It's also the part of our brain that is very creative. It's the part of our brain that can put meaning on things, that brings so much like richness into our life. And it's that same part of the brain that also lies. It's the same part of the brain that has the ability to follow an unstable leader. Animals in the wild, wolf pack, they're not going to follow an unstable leader. It's not going to happen because they don't have this part of our brain that is very colorful and poetic and can create art out of things. So when you're checking your intentions behind your communication, you have to kind of drop into that animal body self that can recognize the resonance of truth. The resonance of truth, meaning all feelings in the body, fall into two different categories. There's expansive feelings, these are the pleasurable feelings, and then there's contractive feelings, these are the not so good feelings. When you are communicating truth from a pure intention, the feeling sensation in your body resonates and vibrates in a very particular way. It feels like truth. It feels maybe a little bit scary if you're not used to communicating in this way, but there's like a boom, like there's like a groundedness to it. It's something that you can push off against. It's something that when you're communicating from that intention and it vibrates as truth, there's no wishy-washiness, right? The wishy-washiness occurs when we go up into our head because our bodily intention is different than the words we're communicating from our head. That's what, we were saying before. That's like the split that happens within us. And then we're voting that into the relationship. We're voting that wishy-washy energy into the relationship. But when your intention aligns to truth and your communication aligns to that same truth, there's a congruence that is translated from your animal body to their animal body. And then voting that into the relationship creates wild amounts of intimacy. The benefits are intimacy, natural intimacy, really, truly being loved. And, I'll say it again, I said it before, but the only way to be truly loved is to truly love yourself. And loving yourself is not looking in the mirror and being like, I love you, because that statement may or may not resonate with you. You may hate yourself or not like yourself and be trying to run from that truth by getting your partner to show up for you in a way where you can band-aid that self-hate. Do you see what I mean? That's where the parts work really shows up. But truly loving yourself is treating yourself like a crying child that just wants to be picked up. You're bringing your attention, your awareness, and your focus to these wounded aspects, and then you're loving them from this space of just getting curious of like, I wonder who this part of me is. I wonder what the underlying needs, the underlying goals, the underlying intentions behind this wounded part of myself. And you're picking that up and alchemizing it, creating art with it, and then bringing that into the relationship. Like I said, I do have a free guide, The Self-Sabotage Solution. I go through things like why everything you've been told about forgiveness is fucked up, why everything you've been told about self-love is fucked up, and a bunch of other things. And essentially how to actually do it correctly in a way that lands in your animal body. And it's not just this woo-woo mental spiritual construct in your mind, because that's like one of my biggest pet peeves. So go ahead and download that and like this video and subscribe, and I will see you soon.